what started it for me was the thought that everyone is born a baby, knowing nothing. So what makes some people then grow to be an adult that knows something about eternity, about theology, about all this stuff can't can't possibly know.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Atheists Having Cocktails with Christians. I'm fortunate today to be sitting and talking to Ian Arkley from the band Seventh Angel, one of my favorite metal bands in the Christian realm and non-Christian realm. Great band. First two records were amazing. So thank you, Ian, for doing the show. And I think you're a band that maybe not a lot of metal kids today know or remember, but maybe now can kind of get that band out there to some of the new generation so they can hear some amazing music. So thank you for doing the show, sir.
That's okay. Yeah, we're in the where are they now pile.
Yeah, you know, I think most Christian metal bands of the 80s, 90s, and whatnot are in that pile. You know what I mean? So, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where you're at in life, what you do today. Are you still doing music? Some background of what you've been up to the last few years.
Yeah, I'm still doing music. My main two active bands at the moment, My Silent Wake, which I've been doing for 20 years. But we've just finished gigging this year. We've done 3 gigs this year, and our final gig was the end of August. We decided not to do any more gigs because it's getting more and more difficult to get us all together and to do things like that. So we haven't split up. We still can do recordings and that, but we just decided not to gig. And also, I'm in a goth band as well, which is called Guillotine Dream. And we're still doing a few more gigs. And we've done a few albums. With My Silent Wake, it's more death doom, but
Right.
experimental as well. And yeah, with Guillotine Dream, it's sort of more traditional goth rock, like Fields of the Nephilim kind of
Right.
stuff.
Very cool. Now where are you originally from Wales? Because that's where you are right now, correct?
No, I'm not originally from Wales. I've lived here 7 years. Originally, I'm from sort of Midlands area near Birmingham,
Okay.
sort of not far from where like Sabbath and Zeppelin and Priest sort of come from. Was those kind of bands,
Nice.
so that sort of area. That's where
Right.
I'm from. But I've I lived in the Midlands till I was sort of mid-20s, and then I moved to Weston-super-Mare, which is southwest near Glastonbury kind of area,
Okay.
and then yeah, 7 years ago moved to Wales.
Nice. What do you do for a living?
I've retired now. I
Oh,
was sorry about the light; it keeps changing. Is that all right? Or do you
yeah,
want me
it's
to
fine.
move? Yeah. Well, I was a train driver. I worked driving heavy freight trains, um, moving coal and that kind of thing. But
Okay.
yeah, I did that for 18 years, and now I've retired. So I took early retirement, and so I yeah, that's I'm on a small pension. My
Cool.
wife Sarah works from home, and I just spend my time. I make a few videos. I've got my interest in railways, so I've got a railway channel on YouTube. I've got my music channel on YouTube. And
Nice.
as I say, still do music. Done a couple of solo albums as well, which I've recorded it in my house here.
Mhm.
We're sort of in the countryside here near the woods, so it gives you a lot of inspiration.
Nice. All right. Well, let's get back to the beginning of Seventh Angel. Was that your first band, or had you done projects before Seventh Angel?
Yeah, that was absolutely my first band. In fact, when the the idea for the band started, it was I couldn't really play. It was me and a friend of mine just came up with the idea, and then another friend sort of joined with us. And yeah, we were just learning to play really at the time. This was sort of at 87 sort of time, and yeah, but by 89 we'd sort of got our act together. Mm-hmm. Like me and the original person, he kind of moved on, and we got other drummers involved and that kind of thing. And yeah, by 89 we'd done a demo and managed to get a full lineup, and it went from there really.
Yeah.
Within very short space of time, we'd done the albums and split up, and it was all over. It was quite, it happened really quickly, ridiculously quickly.
Now, did you guys start off originally wanting to be a Christian band, or did it just something that evolved?
Yeah, because I mean, at the time, it was really important to me. It was I'd been brought up a Christian by my mum and dad, and then we sort of met someone who was very extreme, like their Christianity. Sort of, he was quite instrumental in the way the band was formed, and so was a manager at the time. But that kind of went pear-shaped in the end. But that's something I really want to talk about too much. But yeah, it's all sort of part of the story, I suppose. But
well, what was the Christian scene like in Europe at the time in '87? Were there a lot of Christian bands? Because I know that here in, I grew up in Southern California, where Deliverance and Vengeance and the Crucified and a lot of the big names started. And the Southern California scene had a really good scene for Christian metal and metal around. So, I mean, did you guys have, any contemporary bands that maybe Americans never heard of that you guys were playing with? Or was it just kind of you guys playing with everybody?
Sorry. It wasn't really a scene as such, I wouldn't say, but there were bands, there were some like lesser known bands definitely around at the time. And then you got sort of us and Detritus that were playing the more extreme sort of metal at the time. And I think we were the only two more extreme bands that were signed. But then you had other bands that are still going, like Stairway. And I mean, there's bound to be others that are still, I don't know, that maybe not still going, but I'm trying to think now. I mean, it's a long time ago. I mean, we're talking sort of late 80s. Well, sure, sort of seen off kind of left behind a long time ago, really. So racking my brain. But yeah. But I mean, I'm still in contact with Graham from Stairway. He's a lovely bloke he is. And obviously still Mark from Detritus. He's, one of my closest mates, And Simon from Seventh Angels in My Silent Wake as well. He plays things in My Silent Wake.
Nice. I mean, you definitely guys were, you had a different sound than American and extreme metal did. You guys definitely had a more, obviously European kind of sound and take to your album designs and your sound. You guys were definitely something completely different, a lot darker, a lot I think a lot more mood and ambiance in the metal that you guys were creating, other than just thrash and speed and grindcore. Because I mean, you guys were, if you started in '87, I mean, you were coming up with, the greats, like, especially in Europe with like Carcass and Napalm and, all those really, forefronting extreme, grindcore and death metal bands from Europe. So.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I had a lot of influence from a lot of different styles, really. Because when I first started listening to music, it was sort of a bit of Zeppelin, a bit of Adam and the Ants, and a bit of Bauhaus, some, Saxon, Pink Floyd, So it was a real sort of mixture of bands that I enjoyed when I first got into music.
Mm-hmm. Did especially being in the the '80s and whatnot, did you listen to any of the really great English punk bands like The Business and Cockspur, and The Oppressed and any kind of those bands?
punk wasn't something I was massively into back then. Um, but I mean, I like a lot of post punk nowadays.
Mhm.
So I did like new wave at the time when I was really young, like because a lot of that was in the charts, I suppose, back then. You know, we got bands like Blondie, you know, Dexys and bands like that, and Adam the Ants, and you know, all that kind of thing. You know, Talking Heads, and all that was sort of that was really well known.
Mhm.
So those kind of bands. But you know, back then, sort of early '80s, I was quite young. I was only about 12, you
Yeah.
know, and so I was just discovering sort of music then. And then by the time I was about 14, I'd sort of I started getting into the Christian side of it then, you see. So that's that was a bit of a diversion then for a few years.
Okay.
Then
What were some of your influences from the Christian metal scene here in America? What were the bands you really enjoyed and thought they were on the right track of what you guys wanted to kind of do?
I think some of my favourites were like Messiah Prophet and Saint, um, yeah, Blood Good, I like Barren Cross, uh, and then the more extreme ones like Believer,
Yeah.
Fence.
Yeah. Well, you heard, I don't know if you heard, Roger Martinez from Vengeance recently passed away.
Yeah, I did hear that. Yeah,
Mm. About 3 months ago.
and the singer from Messiah Prophet died in his honor.
See, I don't know who Prophet. Now, are we Prophet? Are we talking the same Prophet that Roger was in years before Vengeance, or is
The
it a different
Messiah,
thing?
the Messiah Prophet, the
Oh,
metal band.
Messiah Prophet. Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were a band I really never got into, so I'm not real familiar with their music.
Yeah, Bride as well. They were another band that were an influence back in the day because their first two albums were quite, you know, sort of full on metal. You know,
Mhm.
the first one was quite experimental actually, from what I remember. And so, you know, those kind of bands were all influences, I would say. But plus all the bands I was into when I was young, like Sabbath and you know Zeppelin and all the new wave of British heavy metal that I liked.
Mhm.
And, you know, and Saxon. That I still had all that influence and Motorhead, you know, that was all there as well.
Yeah.
It, that was certainly all an influence as well. And then at the same time, we were listening to like people like Kemper Crab, you know, as well. So, you know, we always liked to, you know, like, you know, real sort of medieval music as well.
Mhm.
So it's kind of folk music, you know. So there was always a lot of different influences there. It's a bit like, you know, you listen to like early Sabbath and, you know, it would go from a heavy track to something really folky, you know. And I think that was a real influence, that kind of way of doing things.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that was what we were like. You know, we'd have a heavy track and then we'd have something like that acoustic interlude thing that we did. And, you know, what was the influence on us.
Nice. So, how did you guys? What do you remember? What label first signed you when you guys put out um your first record? Was it an American label or was it a European label?
It was a European label. It was part of Kingsway Music. It was Edge Records, and then it was licensed through Under One Flag, who were part of Music for Nations. So that was really good because Music for Nations had some of the bigger metal bands.
Mhm.
So it got us heard by people that obviously wouldn't have heard us, and they used to put out like thrash metal compilations called Speed Kills. I don't know if you remember those.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and so our music would be on there as well as like you know Slayer and Metallica and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
that was a really good way that we got heard. You know, um, I think at the time, you know, couldn't quite believe that. You know, it was like we really like people like Roy Rowland. We liked his production, like on bands like Sabbath, and we actually got him to produce the second album.
Nice.
And we really liked Rodney Matthews' artwork, and to get him to do the cover was a real dream come true.
Yeah, like I was saying, your artwork very to me had a very much, like you said, medieval kind of, you know,
Yeah,
dark European look. Other when the American thrash stuff was more, like, blood and guts and gore and monsters, or fists, or whatnot. Because I remember first at the Christian bookstore that I grew up in the town I grew up in, you know, seeing the Torment for the first time, and was just like, what kind of album cover is this? And put in the tape, and I mean, bought it that day. I mean, it was that and Lament for the Weary are amazing records. So yeah, I mean, I like you said, I miss the days of like the old video store where, video renting, where you could, you might pick a movie based on the cover, and sometimes the movie really sucked, and sometimes it was, held up to be what it is. But your guys' albums with that artwork were it was striking. It was very different than what American labels, especially in the Christian bookstore, would allow.
yeah, yeah.
So were you guys able with your label? Were you guys put like in normal stores, or were you just strictly,
Yeah, yeah, because of being distributed through Music for Nations, it was in normal places as well.
nice?
So,
Did you ever maybe see sales better for you guys in Europe than in America, because of the way that your
um,
label was able to put you in common stores, other than just here in America, the Christian bookstore scene?
I honestly don't know about sales. So I really don't know. Again, it was a long time ago, and it's something like I don't think we ever sold loads. We didn't make any money from it or anything. Certainly wasn't any money there. I think as well back then recording used to cost so much money. I think probably anything that came in would paid that max.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, there was no money in it.
Did you guys gig a lot as Seventh Angel back in the day? Did you ever get to come to America, or?
No, we didn't do loads of gigs. For the first few years, we did like, I mean, quite a few. Mainly it was mainly England. We did like Ireland as well. And then yeah, we did Scotland, and then a bit later on, we did do a tour with Tornado as well, a British thrash band, and a bit later on, we started to go more to Europe, like Germany and Netherlands as well. And that was towards the end of the band. So yeah, it was a weird time. I mean, you're talking from '87, where we couldn't really play, and we'd spend half a rehearsal trying to get our guitars in tune, to '92-ish, where we were splitting. End of that time, I think it was the end of that at the start of '93, maybe, when we'd split up. So it was a really short time. We did reform again, sort of 2008, I think it was, and we did that third album. And then we did a few gigs around that time, and then that sort of finished around 2012. Not that we split up again, but we just sort of didn't do anything after that. But yeah, once Seventh Angel had finished initially, I also had a doom band for about 11 years, which was called Ashen Mortality as well. So that was before My Silent Way.
No.
So yeah, I mean, you're talking a lot. I mean, you're talking over 30 years
Oh yeah.
since Seventh Angel split up for the first
Yeah.
time. It's a long time.
And so you said that you grew up in the church. When we were, messaging you whatnot, I asked you. You said basically you're agnostic at this point in time. What kind of, or yeah, you tell me in your words, kind of like where you're at in your spiritual or non-spiritual. place in your life at this point?
Yeah. Um, I haven't got a cocktail. I've got a cup of tea.
Nice.
I wouldn't class myself as a Christian either, so I think I'm sort of under false pretenses here on this show, maybe. But I'm a. Can we call this atheist talks to a agnostic drinking tea or something?
Totally. Well, I mean, for let you know where I'm at, I grew up in Assembly of God churches, and I was a big time believer for up until probably my early late teens, early 20s, and then I'd already had doubts and started kind of questioning and just kind of going through the motions of Christianity just because it's what I knew and what I grew up with. But and then by the time I was in my mid 20s to early to 30s, I'd pretty much just walked away and just at that point in time, for me in my life, just it didn't make any more sense to believe in this in the Bible or what Christianity had to teach any longer because just the contradictions and all the other things I started studying between Buddhism and Hinduism and whatnot. So at that point in time, I walked away and said, I don't need that anymore in my life to make me adhere or conform to something that I think we can do on our own as humans and do it better.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's funny the word doubts. You can also call that thinking for yourself, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
Start for yourself.
Yeah, I should have said questioning other than doubt.
Yeah.
Because that was the point. As growing up, I would always never get a lot of answers from parents or authority. When and especially when you bring up something that is in direct challenge with someone's faith, but they don't know how to answer it. The standard answer always was, "Well, he's God, or it's God's plan. He knows what's best for you." It's like, well, why can't that be, explained to me why this is best for me in my life when it's my life?
Well, there's always an excuse and there's always an answer. That's the thing. And, you can either go along with that or you can kind of take a step away from it and think for yourself and think, well, that's not really making sense to me. Think critically. There's a lack of critical thinking these days. And there's a lot of people going down some very dark paths, I think. And sometimes in the name of Christianity, it's pretty scary.
Yeah. So when did that journey kind of go for you? Like during the Seventh Angel, and then just at one point, maybe after the band sang, or even maybe during the band, starting to have those questions and those feelings that maybe this isn't what I want to do musically, lyrically, or
Well, I mean, when Seventh Angel finished initially, and I started Ashen Mortality, I know at the time, I would have been happy for that to have been classed as a Christian band, Ashen Mortality, but we chatted about it and we decided it was more of a Christians within a band kind of thing, and we weren't. Not all the members were always Christian, so it was like even for Seventh Angel, not every member was always a Christian. So a bit more open as time went by, um, and then yeah, I think by the time I'd started My Silent Wake, it was a case of I was still a Christian, but very much liberal in my views, and also, open to other ideas, and definitely not set in my ways, kind of thing. I don't know. I think I would have still classed myself as a Christian at the start. So that was 20 years ago. So between then and now, it's probably more of a gradual thing where you just come to a point where you can finally say, no, I wouldn't class myself as a Christian anymore, which I think takes quite a lot of, it's a big step really when you've called yourself a Christian from probably the age of 7 or something crazy,
yeah.
It's quite a big step. I mean, I was brought up to believe it all as if it's, this is a mug. God is real. Christ is real. There's no questions about that. It's not something some people believe. It's like, this is real. That's the way I was brought up. I,
I
so
brought up the same way that, like God was tangible in a way where you might not see him, but he's as real as a tree that you could touch,
exactly, yeah. So it wasn't that I was brought up that it was a belief that some people believe, and I was brought up to believe it, without question, without, you know, and to, as we said, that doubts were doubts that were a negative thing, So it was only as I grew older and explored other things and found out that some things weren't true, that took time, and it took going down different paths and meeting other people, that sort of showed me other kinds of wisdom, really. I think as well, I think when I was very much in the Christian sort of scene, I I had a really warped view of non-Christians. It was weird. Yeah, I think you can do that. I think you can have this view of them as a sort of maybe even like a lesser kind of person in a way.
Yeah, that they're, that's, we were brought up in youth group, we were, you know, you know, on Friday nights as, kids going out, witnessing the gospel to people at the mall, and, as a 12, 13, 12, 11, 10-year-old kid walking up to grown adults who you don't know and saying, there's something wrong with you. You don't have what I have.
Yes,
And you're damaged, or
yeah,
you don't have the knowledge that I'm sorry, you 30-year-old man, you don't have the knowledge that this 10-year-old kid is trying to give you at this moment in time. That I have the answers for eternity, and you don't have the answers for life. So no, I hear you. I think, when you say looking down, I agree. It's not I'm a better way, but like we were more the way I'm thinking, like in a pitiful way, like, saying that you don't have this, you're not going to heaven, you're going to hell for eternity, and you don't even know it. So I'm here to save you.
I'm here to save you. Yeah, I've got something that you need, and you do. You think that I don't know. It's only when you come out of that you realize how moral people are without faith, and how much meaning people have in their lives without faith. You think that everyone without faith is just swimming around in this sea of, uncertainty, and just like they're just living these awful lives, and you just got such a ridiculous view of people, And I found that, some of the nicest, most moral, kindest people I've met have been people without any faith, who've never had any faith, and that was a real eye opener to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. Is that, I mean, when people say, the word, you were saying the word morals, and I don't think of morals as a real kind of like entity kind of thing. I think of more like I have ethics, not morals, because I think morals are more of a religious based ideology.
Yeah.
Or yes,
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean that's exactly the same as what I mean when I say moral. I mean moral, not in. It doesn't mean anything to do with the ridiculous things that have been classed as morals, like not having sex before marriage or ridiculous things like that. I'm talking about being moral in the way that you are kind to people and you don't judge people on appearances or sexuality or ridiculous things like that. That's the reason I'm referring to morals.
No, I totally agree. I think it's a word that I think that for me, I like to replace it with just ethics, because there's so many things, in the Bible that are, moral, black and white, but in a real life situation, there's so many more ethics that can, Yeah, it might not be what you call moral, but it might be more ethical as a human being to do this or that or live a certain way without the stigma of God's judgment because of his ideas of what morals should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, so at that point when you just kind of like, this is just not something I'm going to participate in anymore. I mean, did you have family that were upset, or did you have friends that maybe?
Well, I think my mum would have. I mean, both my mum and dad were very Christian, but my dad was so easygoing. He's such a lovely bloke, and I mean, he's massively into his railways. He was, and he passed away unfortunately 10 years ago. But he, with him, he just loved everyone, and it. I don't think it really affected him. Whereas with my mum, I think she was sad that I no longer believed it, but again, I don't think it affected our relationship or anything like that. Unfortunately, she passed away. I think it's 3 years ago. Um, yeah, I mean, she was like Christian in the sense that she was very, very much into her faith and believed it wholeheartedly. But she did live it how she believed it. She would do anything for anyone, basically. Alan very little. So she really did sort of the way that you sort of hope people would be.
Yeah, she actually walked the walk the way that you want your Christians to walk.
To the degree that sometimes she would accept people that you probably should have pushed away, really. Definitely should have pushed away. Because on the other hand, the other side of the coin of atheists and agnostics being some of the best people I've met, some of the worst people I've met.
Yeah.
Guess what? So some of the worst people have been Christians, and I can think of two examples that have really messed my life up. I'm permanently messed my life up.
Yeah.
The things that are never going to go away. So, and those are people that claim to be Christians. I think, if there's a God that sort of really changes people, I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that at all. I'm seeing there's good people and there's bad people, and it's up to you. It's up to you whether you want to be good or bad. I think.
No, I agree. I think I think that we have enough cognitive smarts within ourselves. I mean, there's always going to be people that are greedy and hurtful, and like you said, there's always going to be good or bad people. A religion doesn't make you good or bad, I think, but I think that a lot of people have this concept of, I have ultimate forgiveness, so therefore if I do something, I just ask for forgiveness and I'm okay with it, without understanding the devastation that they leave in their wake. And I think and I'm not saying just Christianity does that. I think Catholicism does it. I think Jehovah's Witness do it. I think anything that puts humans in charge of other humans, especially in a religious context where people are blinded and brainwashed and unwilling to see beyond what they're taught, is a dangerous concept, and it's a dangerous power that no human should have.
Absolutely, I agree entirely with that. I think that is the problem, that you think, oh, I'm weak, I'm doing this, but I know I shouldn't. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it's so easy. Whereas if you don't have that to fall back on, you kind of, well, I'm responsible.
mm-hmm.
I'm responsible, and I don't have anyone I can come crying to after.
Yeah,
like a little kid doing something wrong, crying to their mom. Oh, sorry.
yeah. I was talking to I don't remember who the gentleman was, somebody on one of the shows, and he brought up, if there is no God, then how can we account for humans in the world, and the natural physical things that are happening. And I said to him, I go, just the answer of God is just too easy. It's just such an easy cop out to where it's like, well, where did it come from? Well, God made us. And I just kind of looked at him like, look at our human cells, look at our bodies, where God's sitting up there going, I'm going to make you human, but okay, let's get he's going to have some structure. So there's bones. It's going to have organs. Well, there's going to be blood. There's got to be skin. Wait, now there's going to be fingernails, and there's going to be teeth and taste, and all these amazing things that make up you and myself and the world around us. All these amazing, uh, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Just happenstances of life that I think it's just so easy to be like, well, just God did that. God did that. I think that when you look at the complexity of what we are as humans, that there's so much more to it, and so much more that we can get by saying we don't have to believe in that God, where we can look at what we've done and what we are and get better answers.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't know why we're here, and we're never going to know. I don't think we're ever going to know for certain.
If there is something, we'll know at the end of this journey. We'll know when this flesh rots and and goes in the ground. And if there's something out there, then we'll take the next step. But yeah, that's also the problem I have with Christianity and any religion, is like, you haven't taken that last step into eternity yet. You cannot tell me 100%. And I could be wrong. I was talking to George Ochoa from Deliverance, and he asked me the question. He goes, well, what happens if I'm right and you're wrong? I go, well, then I guess I accept the punishment for something I had nothing to do with, other than not believing in something. But I'm like, George, what happens if you're wrong? What goes on? If when the lights go out for you, there's nothing, then you've spent your time, your energy, and your money and whatnot, just feeding the machine that helps themselves other than you.
I'm preaching something that's just nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, this is what sparked it off for me. Exactly what you just said, that no one knows, and the fact that everyone. I think what started it for me was the thought that everyone is born a baby, knowing nothing. So what makes some people then grow to be an adult that knows something about eternity, about theology, about all this stuff we can't possibly know? How do they get the authority to tell people this is the fact? How does that happen from a newborn baby? How do they think they've got that authority, and how do they think they've got that knowledge at some point?
That they have the direct divine answers,
Doesn't make sense. You or I could wake up tomorrow and start a new religion if we wanted to.
Yeah.
And would that be any less valid than what's already come before us? As far as Jesus' life goes, we only know what's been written down years and years after he was supposedly here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really know the facts.
Yeah. I think that if Jesus was a real person, that he would have just been some sort of not a rabbi per se, but maybe some sort of just I don't want to say street preacher, but he would have just been some sort of, maybe a contemporary ideologist that had different views of what, rabbinical studies were teaching and saying at that time. I think he would have just been somebody who was had some different ideas, and I don't even think what Jesus really said was so much a bad thing.
No, I think most of what was said was good. I think the advice was generally good. Not
Mhm.
all of it, but I think a lot of it was. And I think, a lot of it was a good way to live. So, but, even if he was a real person, even if he existed, even that doesn't prove anything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and especially with Christians, you know, I think a lot of what Jesus said in the books, if you were real, is more of an allegory of really, like more Gnostic gospel kind of stuff than actual like a literal heaven and God the Father, where he's talking. I think he's really talking a lot of very much Middle Eastern kind of philosophy, where you become, I'm going to show you the way to enlightenment, to everlasting life through this, through the steps in you to get to the Father. I think he's talking about us expanding our minds to that we become not a god in the shape of magical powers, but a god within ourselves that can control our thoughts, our emotions, our. He's got a very cool Hindu-esque kind of things that he says that I think that a lot of Christians just kind of sweep under the rug and don't want to. Because I mean, here's the thing, we have Jesus till he's 12. He doesn't know he's Jesus, or he doesn't know he's God, but he's the son of God, but he is God. And then you have, this angel come and tell him he's God and has to be, persecuted for the sins of the world. And then we don't hear anything again until he's 30. So if he was a person, maybe, he was, maybe, you know, in that time, there were so many different religions anyway. I'm sure he heard so many different aspects of faith and mysticism and you know all that kind of stuff to where I think that he in that realm definitely heard a lot of ideas that became Hindu that are Hindu.
Yeah. Yeah. I just enjoy having an open mind. It's so much more. That is freedom,
Yeah.
whereas Christianity isn't freedom. It's funny that it's classed as well. Christians class it as freedom. It's bizarre to me now.
Yeah. You
So,
know, and like you said, and I agree 100%. It's not. I think a lot of people that are still Christian, don't understand how people like us get to where we are. And like you said, it's a gradual, journey to get there. It's not like I woke up one day, ate breakfast and was like, yeah, I don't believe anymore. It was a long time of inner conflict and thinking and and feeling guilt and like
yeah,
and fear, like, am I doing the right thing? Am I if I reject this, am I going to hell?
yeah,
I think once you get over the fear and see the the realness of what life is, it's an easy step to start taking one at a time. You know.
well, yeah. I mean, you think of it like this: if you've been brought up to believe it all as fact, it's like saying, well, if I go out now and crash a car and smash things up, I'm going to go to prison for that. But and now, if I go out and say I'm no longer a Christian and it's not real, God's not real, I'm going to hell and I'm going to be punished for all eternity. It's like if you have any kind of slight belief that that could possibly be true, it's terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's far more terrifying than if you smash up that car and smash things up and end
Yep.
up in prison. It's far more terrifying than that. So, as you say, there's conflict, there's guilt, it's not easy to leave behind your faith. It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's you're dealing with so much. Um, it, you're having to leave behind something that was a real integral part of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I make it clear too, like, you know, I had a lot of fun as a Christian kid. You know what I mean? I made a
Yeah.
lot of good friends. It's not like had a horrible, horrible time being a Christian. You know, I had, we had, a youth group and friends and, you know, and and also it's something to be said about being young and having first experiences all over, every time, you've never done this, you've never done that. So every time you're getting to another milestone, it's nothing you've experienced. So there's joy in it, it's like when you get your driver's license, it's
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I
it's
had
not
that.
like, people say, oh man, you're just bitter, you hate God, I'm like, no, I don't hate God because I don't believe he exists. I don't even hate Christians. I dislike the dishonesty that I believe that Christianity poses and propagates. And but I had a good time. I had, when I was a kid, first, the first, medal that I that was mine that I got to choose was Striper, So I mean, listening to Striper, and before I found the extreme medal, Baron Cross and Blood Good and Secret Warrior, and hanging out with my friends and listening to the tapes, and my parents taking me to Christian shows. I had a very, very nice time and a lot of really fond memories of my faith. But I was also a kid. That would have been fun if I was going to see, if I was in Depeche Mode, and I was going to
Yeah.
my first Depeche Mode album, concert. It's a milestone of
Yeah.
firsts for me. I think that, as kids, of course you're, you know, ecstatic and militant and guns
Yeah.
up for anything because it's the first thing you've been passionate about until you find out that sometimes passion doesn't work all the time.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right there. And I was the same, I did have a great time doing Seventh Angel and, especially as it was, my first band and, it's like a dream come true being able to play in a band and do all this stuff, especially as it took off pretty well, pretty quickly, really. More than for a lot of bands. So yeah, I mean that side of it was great, and but there were darker elements as well. I had to do something. Um, so yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag, really.
Yeah. Um, when you guys got back together to do the third album, I'm assuming you were just doing the album and it wasn't going to be a Christian album if you weren't really following that pretext at that point in time.
Um, then I think I would have still classed myself as a Christian. What was that, 2008, 2009? Um, Trying to think now. Um, Basically we just wanted to get back together as the four of us, and because we were the final lineup of Seventh Angel with
Mhm.
Mark, right? So Mark from Detritus. Um, and I mean back then Si was still Christian, and then Mark was Christian, Tank wasn't at the time, and I was sort of veering towards agnosticism. Um, that's why some of the lyrics are, a bit sort of, I don't know, faith infused, I would say, although nothing too blatant on that album.
If you had to pick, out of the first two records, which one do you think is your best record out of Torment or Lament?
Definitely the second one. I think, I mean, some of the lyrics on the first one, I'm really not happy about. But mainly the ones I wrote. um, but
Everybody's always their own hardest critic, I mean,
yeah, but I think some of them were a bit stupid. Looking back, I mean, I was young. I was young, but I was also a bit didn't understand certain things um, in life, and I think I sort of went in there all guns blazing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. But do you think also maybe like when you know at that time when you're writing and you're in that moment of Christianity trying to be a Christian band, it's one of those things. Was it ever on your mind like, oh man, I got to make sure that the lyrics at least sound biblical or Christian or was it ever a forethought like because I mean I've heard from other Christian artists and bands like if the Christian labels or music stores didn't hear a certain way of how the gospel was presented in this metal music, they would, they'd have a hard time putting them in stores. So bands had a hard time kind of, making sure that their lyrics were acceptable, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose my lyrics on Torment were quite simplistic. There wasn't a lot. If you were a Christian, there wasn't a lot that you would argue with, I suppose. But you'd have to be quite a fundamentalist
Yeah.
Christian, I suppose. Yeah, some of them were controversial as far as where you stood politically. I think, like Dr. Hatchet, for instance, and maybe even like Tormented Forever, where it's sort of about hell. Dr. Hatchet about abortion. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm really not about those lyrics, to be honest.
I get it. I mean, I used to play in a punk rock band, and
Yeah,
I wrote a song. This was right after Columbine happened, and the school shooting
yeah,
back in '99, and I mean, this song was pretty rough about basically the shooters. I mean, okay, I mean, we all grew up in school. We saw the jocks and the cool kids picking on the dorks or whatnot. So basically, this was a song of these bullies that were picking on these two kids got what they deserved. Like you know you know bullets take care of problems sometimes, and it's a pretty shocking, pretty hardcore song, and we were trying to do anything we could to get a label to look at us or whatnot. So I made a bunch of copies of it and sent them out to like TBN and the 700 Club, thinking maybe somebody would do a story on it, and we'd get no, it didn't happen. But years later, I look back and I regret, right? I'm lucky. I'm glad that song never put us on the map for anything because I totally don't agree with the lyrics of that song anymore. I think it was a I think it's not a horrible song. It's a good punk rock song, but lyrically, I'm ashamed that I wrote that because innocent people were were killed over this. So it's one of those songs I get when you go back and you look at it and you go, man, where was I in my head at this time? And
yeah.
I regret
That's right. You're so fired up about things, especially when you're young, and you just don't understand the ins and outs about things.
yeah.
Uh, you've got, your own kind of. It is really black and white for you, isn't it? Back then, and you kind of just don't understand the intricacies of life. It's amazing, really.
That well, I think youth breeds excitement and piss and vinegar. Where as you get older, you learn wisdom, you learn patience, you learn a lot more of
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a full on brawl or a fight to get your point across anymore. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna adjust my some.
Yeah, no, I could tell a joke at this point, but I won't. I'm going to adjust mine and so on.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I think that as we get older, we learn patience and we go through different things, and not everything's so black and white, and maybe not everything's as urgent or as dire as we think they are when we're kids, and like we got to do something now. I mean, I remember feeling that way as a young Christian. I mean, because I mean, I was grew up in it, but I remember it was my summer right before sixth grade, and I went to Christian camp for 2 weeks, and it's one of those experiences. I mean, yeah, when you're 300 miles away from friends and family, and all you have is you're having fun, you're swimming and hanging out with your friends and whatnot, but it's every day you're getting preached at and worships, and like they're really putting it thick on you. Then you make that decision at 10, like I'm going to be a warrior for Jesus.
Yeah.
And when I came home, I was hardcore. I had a
Yeah.
friend, an older gentleman in our youth group, who used to make t-shirts, with like Bible quotes, and I remember him making me a bunch. I'd wear them to, when school started, I was like, boom, I'm wearing my shirts, and just like, I'm a sixth grader. What the hell do I know about Psalms or Ephesians or anything like that? I'm just regurgitating what I'm being taught. So yeah, those are the years where you're like, man, I'm gonna make a difference. I'm gonna make a change. But we're kids, and I think the pressure that the church puts on the youth is extremely harmful, because we don't even know anything about our bodies, or can't even drive a car, but then we're supposed to be accountable for our souls for eternity. I think it's a very warped thing.
There is still, it's easy to lump all Christians together in this like fundamentalist kind of so on that sort of bandwagon. But there are still like more liberal people out there, and like in America as well, where it's a lot more moderate,
Honestly, man, the here in America at this moment in time, the the fundamentalists, the evangelicals, man, they're a scary group. They're a very scary group.
They really are, and I found it really unsettling how many of the old bands that I used to like are really in that camp. It really surprised me that. Pretty scary.
Yeah. Well, it's like my parents, who were in the hippie generation, and you know, and now and my mom's always been a Christian, and my dad growing up, I don't ever really think he was, because I'd sit next to my dad at church, and he would always nudging me and be like, yeah, don't listen to this is crap, this is you know I think a lot of times he just went to church so my mom didn't yell at him.
uh,
But at this point, my dad's been battling Lou Gehrig's disease for like 20 years now. Yeah, which is amazing, because most people that get Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, die within the first 3 to 4 years. He's had it for like 20 years now. But I don't know if it's because he's coming to an age where he is now not feeling well or doing well. But within the last year, he's really reverted to this very extreme conservative Christian ideology. Same with my mother. And my dad will send me, crazy clips. And I'm just like, man, coming from a generation where you saw people, you went through civil rights. You got to see, people being exploited and pushed down, and people fighting for their freedoms. And now you're basically wanting to give up freedoms for everyone just because you want to follow this manifesto of some book that's thousands of years old, that you've never read original translations. You don't know what it meant. How many people have translated it to their own ideology? It's like it makes me go, how can you guys just swallow this? It's these people are dangerous. They want to take over. They want to be in control. And they want everyone else to bow down.
Yeah, one thing as well. What I said about the band members being like this. It's that was an eye opener for me, because like I said about some of the lyrics on the Torment, they're very similar to some of those bands, and a lot of people, that have added me on Facebook, I'm unfollowing more and more these days, because it's just doing my head in. They assume that we're like that politically, and we were never like that politically, even though some of our lyrics at the time might have made it look that way.
You know,
We were never right wing, you know. I've never been like that. That's the
yeah,
thing. So that's another thing that, you know, again, that us coming from Britain, it's like it's very different politically.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I
so
mean, you guys actually know, especially coming from Britain, there can be crazy right wing extremists like the National Front that have been,
exactly, exactly.
started in the '70s, and then,
Yeah,
I mean,
that
what
was
was it?
always horrendous for us. That was like, it, the last thing you'd want to be associated with.
Yeah, but now,
Always,
didn't
especially
10 years
Christians.
ago they had a few seats in Parliament? They still might. I don't know, but I mean, last I heard like there were like three members of the National Front that had seats in Parliament. I'm like, that is insane. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got things that getting a bit worrying again now with like reform and all the people that think they're clever painting traffic roundabouts as like flags, and I don't know if you've heard about all that nonsense, but
Mm.
yeah, there's a lot of stupidity.
We're dealing with here in America too, my friend. We're definitely seeing, the yeah.
Yeah, me and my wife, we've kept up. We've me and my wife have kept up with it. We watch there's a really good YouTube channel called Internet Today. I don't know if you
Okay.
watch that. Yeah, they're really good. They're really funny.
Yeah,
But
and that's the
yeah,
thing, even though I'm definitely on the more on the left side,
yeah,
doesn't mean that, I mean, I think people just want to have this division where it's like, I'm definitely not conservative, but also I know when the left has gone too far too, when they're trying to push dumb
yeah,
agendas as well, you know?
absolutely.
So,
If you're a thinking person, you can see that there's stupid things on both sides. And, just because you're left leaning doesn't mean you're going to accept everything that someone from the left says. You've got your own mind, haven't you, at the end of the day?
yeah,
It
yeah.
just means that you align more with that sort of way of thinking, that's all. You
Let me add, because I mean, we're dealing right now, like since we're talking a little politics, with
yeah,
with what's going on with tariffs and whatnot. I mean, here in America right now, man, groceries are out of control, expensive, clothing. I mean, things are just up, 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 and more expensive. Like, when I used to be able to go to the grocery store for my wife, myself, and my two kids, $200, man, that would get us, a month. Now it's like, 400 or 500 bucks. I mean, things are just crazy expensive because of all these dumb tariffs that are happening and under this administration. Did you guys kind of feel that with Brexit at the same time when you guys did because of
things are
Brexit things really
yeah,
started kind of getting more expensive?
things are definitely more expensive. Definitely groceries, definitely
Yeah.
that's gone up. Yeah. Um,
So I'm thinking we're having kind of a similar
yeah.
duality and what's going on when it comes to to taxes.
Well, the problem is that people aren't very well informed, are they? They vote on these things and they don't really know what they're voting for, do they?
Yeah.
Think a lot of the
Or they
time.
vote for it and then the candidate says, well, or just doesn't come out and do it at all. I mean, I was reading this thing where we're supposed to be getting back next year under this administration, a $2,000 stimulus check. I'm like, that's nothing. You know what I mean? I mean, sure.
Yeah. That
Rent's
is
crazy. I mean, if you're living in a decent place anywhere in this city, you're going to be paying at least $1,200. So I mean, if you've got two kids and you're paying a car insurance and car payments, and say you're a single parent, and all this gentleman, this administration's wanting to cut, food school programs and all this other stuff. I mean, at least you guys. I mean, does Wales? Well, I'm sure Wales has universal health care.
yeah, I mean the thing is it's NHS, you see, National Health Service. So, yeah, we don't have to pay for anything. I
Yeah.
mean you do pay like you pay a contribution when you work in,
Mhm.
obviously pay tax and national insurance while you're working. But yeah, you don't. Yeah, you don't have to pay for healthcare. You pay for dentistry,
Mhm.
but yeah, you don't pay for the doctor.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah. That's, I mean,
not
and
efficient.
as much as this country makes, we should be able to take care of our citizens a lot better than we do, especially veterans and the disabled and mentally sick. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like I say this to the Christians. I'm like, how much money do you give to your pastor every week when you sit at that pew? Where does that money go? Is your church accountable? Do you get to see that? Does anybody ever get to, that's not, maybe not in the inner workings on the board? Where do you know this money's going towards? That money should be going towards, you know, the sick, the homeless, anything that Jesus would have given it to. That's where your money should be going, not having, the best PA system for Sunday worship, you know? So I mean,
It's funny, isn't it? It's all like Christianity, but a lot of it's nothing to do with Christianity at all, has it?
no, not at all. Has to do with money.
Nothing to
It's
do
all
with
that.
it. It's not.
Yeah,
There's absolutely no relation whatsoever. Most of it.
yeah. It's
Is
it's it's funny. My grandmother, who again, like you were talking about your mom, if I ever did meet a Christian who was real, it was my grandmother. She was poor as hell. She lived in a small town out in western Kansas. She'd been retired for years. I think she made $436 a month through Social Security, and sweetest woman in the world. I mean, and if there was a true Christian, she loved Jesus, she loved people, she loved her church. Every month she gave something to Pat Robertson, to TBN, to her church, and somewhere else, And if even if it was $5 or $10, she gave what she could. And I remember when she passed away, my mom and sister went to talk to the pastor of the church at the time that she was, and she'd been going to that church. I remember going to that church when I was like 5. So I mean, she'd been going there her whole life. I think she was like one of the first 6 people that started going to that church when it opened. And the pastor was going on and on and on, and he said, "Oh yeah, we'll miss your mother. She was such a great uh, person at the church, and we know the struggle she had. So anytime she wrote us a check and donated to the church, we'd always give it back to her and make sure we took no money from her. And my mom goes, "You're lying. My mother never used a checkbook in her life. She always gave cash." So you don't even he didn't even know his own flock, and then had to make up the story saying to make himself look good. Like, my grandmother never used a checkbook in her life. She was that old school Depression era lady who she would cash her check and hoard that shit in her mattress. You know what I mean? So that's I think a nice summarization of what I think most churches are.
Yeah.
All churches are. I'm sorry. If you're taking money from people in your congregation that are having a hard time feeding their kids,
Mhm.
you're a monster.
Yeah, I agree.
You know.
It should be going the other way, shouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely should be going the other way. You know. Is Wales a pretty heavy Christian nation? Is it pretty secular? Is it?
Well, that's a good question. I, I, I haven't found. Well, I've been here 7 years. I haven't found much difference between Wales and England. I mean, it was obviously there was a big sort of religious kind of revival in Wales with like I think it was like Methodists, wasn't it? And there's loads of old chapels around everywhere, but a lot of them are sort of made into housing and that there. So I don't know if there's much difference between England and Wales as far as
I just didn't know if it was more like contemporary Christian or Church of England still pretty heavy, or Catholicism, or
yeah. I mean, that's something I'm really not sure about. I mean, um, because I live in the countryside. We're in a little village, and there's a chapel almost opposite the house. And I literally thought it had been bought up by someone for some storage or something. There's no sign outside it or anything, but it is actually still a chapel.
No,
And occasionally you can hear them singing hymns, but it's really small. They don't shout about it at all. I think there's
yeah.
only a few people go there, and I think it's all in Welsh. So,
Now,
yeah,
are English and European churches more subdued? Like, I'm sure you've probably seen videos of like the American Pentecostals that are running around and screaming and flopping around and doing all that crazy whooping. Is that something like if a Christian from Europe would England or Welsh or Europe come over and go to an American church and see that, would they go, what the hell is going on here? Or is it
well,
not
there are Pentecostal churches in Britain. I mean, I went to one. I used to go to one now and again when I was really into it. Um, in Birmingham, there was a place called Hockley that I used to go to, and that was quite full on. But I mean, the church where I went with my parents since I was a baby, um, yeah, that had started as a brethren church, but that had become gradually a little bit more charismatic as it had gone on, and they did have like this sort of various sort of. It was quite open. They'd have a service in the morning where each person could say and do what they wanted, really.
Mhm.
So you get people speaking in tongues and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was quite aware of all that sort of thing, and I was quite that way really for a few years. Um, so yeah,
I went through the 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 anointed Holy Spirit phase in my youth too, where and I admitted it. I mean, I think that I mean, obviously, I don't believe it's real. I think it's fake, but also I know in my case, I was making it up because I wanted to seem like God had touched me. You know what I mean? You see all these people doing it, and you don't want to be left out. You don't want to be looked at as not as a Christian as them. So I mean, but again, as a 10, 11-year-old kid, the fuck did I know? You know what I mean? I just knew that I didn't want to seem that like God wasn't working in my life. So therefore I was able to parrot and mimic what I saw the older people doing just so that I could look favorably in that way. And, you know, I made it, I said it on my show. I made that shit up. I had, I had no idea, I have no idea, what I was making up or what not. It was just the appearance of, I was anointed by the Holy Spirit.
yeah. I mean, you can really go along with things if you
Yeah.
let yourself. It's amazing um, how much you can be influenced.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think that, and I think too that here in America, especially, or maybe not in just America, but in the whole music thing, especially, I know as a kid, even though I wasn't making Slayer my idols, I was making Deliverance my idols. I was making Vengeance my idols. You know what I mean? I think that the Christian market just wanted to, whether they begrudgingly or not, we replace something with something. We
Yeah,
we we wanted metal, so we found Christian metal. We wanted, Christian punk, so somebody had to come up and make it. I kind of just have the idea, or just in my head that like, I don't really believe in Christian metal because I don't believe Christian metal can be a Christian thing. I think metal was made out of something completely different and against authority and whatnot. So, I don't know, just even like Striper trying to look like Motley Crue. It seems like Christians are always trying to find that secular thing just to make more money off of, make
it's
their own Christian worship.
yeah. Some of them sounded exactly like the sort of secular
Mm-hmm.
counterpart of modern boys. So, uh, you know, unashamedly so.
Yeah. And I'll give that to Seventh Angel. Like I said, you guys had a very different sound compared to the American bands. Very different.
I think part of that is because I didn't sort of, because we sort of we're learning to play and it all happened really quickly. I think I didn't start playing other people's music really. I learnt a few riffs and that was it. And I mean, you mentioned Striper. They were an influence as well at the time.
Mhm.
And I had a video of them, and I remember watching that and like some of the things they were doing because I was self-taught, you know. And
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm a bass player. I never took lessons. I'll
yeah,
watch or figure it out, you know?
yeah, exactly. A few people showed me some things, showed me how to do pinched harmonics and things like that, and you just cobbled all this together and then did your own thing, really. And I think in some ways that's better. It's like some of the old experimental bands, you know, like so some of the old bands from Germany, early sort of 70s and that, they sort of really experimental, some bands would just like they'd pick up instruments that, they maybe didn't normally play and they'd just see what came out, like experimental bands. And
Yeah.
in a way, it was almost like that, just sort of, okay, by the time we recorded, we could play what we were playing, but
Yeah.
we weren't like virtuosos.
Well, yeah, it's like when I tell people I play bass, if they were like, you know, come over, let's be a cover band, I'd be like, no, like I can write music, I can write riffs and whatnot, but if you're like, hey, I want you to, we're gonna be a cover band and play, I'm like, nah, that's not what I do because that's just I don't know how to read music, you know. I mean, I know my strings, but if somebody was like, hey, play an A sharp, and then I'll be like, nah, I don't know what you're talking about, and that's why I love punk so much. Is punk was
Yeah,
just, man, grab a guitar and do it. You know what I mean? You don't have to be Steve Vai, you don't have to be Eddie Van Halen. You can just, you know what I mean? That's how I learned to play was covering the Ramones and covering that kind of stuff. So
well, that's it. For me, it was the creative thing as much as playing music.
yeah.
And I think if you're playing covers and that, you're missing out on more that whole creative sort of aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been in a band in about 9 years now. I was in a band from 17 till about 41, and
Mm.
it's not that I don't want to play anymore. It's just I'm just too busy for it. I own my own business. I have kids and whatnot, and it's just to the point where it's like, and I'm almost 50. Like I'm never gonna tour. If I do anything, it's just gonna be for the fact of to write and maybe record something. But
Yeah.
it's just. But I mean, yeah, we had a ton of crazy fun times playing. But shit, where am I going with that? I lost my train of thought. But I lost it. Sorry, I lost what I was going to say.
I
But
know that feeling very well.
yeah. Oh no, but that's what I was going to say was I think the last thing was that I was going to, before I decided not to do anymore was I was supposed to start up Vengeance Rising with Roger again, and
Oh,
yeah, so it's me and I mean I didn't know if you knew me and Roger had been really good friends the last 3-4 years while he was sick. I mean, talking all the
no,
time
I
and
did not know
he'd
that.
been on my show a
No.
few times, 3 or 4 times, and he wanted to do another album. So I started trying to like, but like quick story was Roger hadn't listened to metal in 30 years, so I'm like, well, what do you want to sound like, and so I'd throw him ideas and he'd say yes, and then he'd throw me ideas and. Just long story short, just he was too sick. It just didn't materialize. But that was always my dream was to as a young Christian was to play in a Christian metal band. I wanted to. I was never good enough as a bass player. I mean, but that was
I'm
always
really
my
sorry. I
goal.
didn't realize that he was a close friend and that. So I'm really sorry that you've
Oh,
lost
I
him.
mean, I mean, yeah, it sucks. I miss him, but I mean, then we're all going to come to the end of this journey. The people that that mourn forever and like, dude, I'm so glad I got to know him for years. I am so glad I got to talk to you. I mean, your albums were a big influence on me as a young Christian kid. You know what I mean? I loved your band. I was always like I said, it was just your music was so much different, especially like when I got into the more secular stuff, like like the European stuff. Like I said, Carcass and Bull Thrower and Cathedral and all those. Like those records very much remind me more of that style than the American extreme metal. Because not saying that there weren't legit bands, but really up until like you guys, Mortification. I will say, like I said, Believer earlier. I love Believer. They very much are one of my favorite bands. I said it. Their name sucked. I think their name hindered them. I think it was just a dumb name to have, like Believer. Like, okay, whatever. But I mean, like I put them up as good as like Death. Chuck Shover from Death. I mean, they were that proficient and that talented. And then you got, so I mean, like, yeah, that was my goal, was to be a Christian metal guy, but I wasn't that good at bass, so I played punk rock instead.
Cool.
So yeah. Well, I know you got to get going here pretty quick, so we're gonna wrap it up, man.
Yeah, we're off to see Stuart Lee tonight.
What's that?
Stuart Lee, comedian. I'll check out Stuart Lee.
Is that who you're going to tonight?
Yeah, he's a really good comedian.
Nice.
Yeah, check him out.
I will. But real fun, other than Christianity or metal or whatnot. What football team do you like? What's your team?
I'm not really a sport person.
Okay.
To be honest.
Okay.
I'm trains and music, really. That's trains, music, and 14 subjects. Sort of strange.
No, that's cool. Didn't know if you were a football fan, especially coming from Britain. I mean, that's one of my goals is someday I want to be able to come over and see West Ham play. So,
cool.
Yeah, West Ham versus either Man U, Man City, or Arsenal. That'd be great matches. So, I guess that's just my American, like putting a stigma on you, like, oh, he's from England, he must love football.
I've got friends that are massively into it though. My mate, the drummer from Guillotine Dream, my goth band, he's a big football fan.
Yeah, well, like here in America, I'm 6'6". I'm a big guy. People always walk up to me like, "Do you play football?" I'm like, "Nope." They're like, "Do you play basketball?" I'm like, "Nope." They're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Dude, I grew up in LA, man. I skateboarded, I played punk rock, and I went to the beach. Like, I was never a big sports guy growing up either." But yeah, I started getting into European football many years ago. So when they said, "Do you watch football?" I'm like, "Yes, but not the kind you think."
Soccer, that's what you call it.
Soccer over here. Yeah. I will say, I live in Kansas City. I guess next year we're housing like 3 big World Cup matches here in Kansas City. So,
yeah.
So I'm like, I might, if tickets are right, I might have to go.
Are you a fan of much post-punk? Being a fan of punk?
What's that? I'm sorry?
Are you a fan of much post-punk? Being a fan of punk?
Oh yeah. Yeah. The only music I'm not a big fan of, I'm not a big rap guy. Like I like Southern California. I love me some old school gangster rap, like Ice Cube and Snoop and NWA. But like the rap that like is today and whatnot, like I just don't care. But yeah, I love post punk stuff. Yeah, Fugazi, all that stuff.
One of my favorite bands is New Model Army. Are you familiar with them?
Oh yeah,
absolutely love them. I think I've just completed my collection now. So I think I've got all the stuff.
Nice.
Well, all the main albums. So
I'm with you. I'm also a big goth guy too. Like I'm a huge fan of like, the Cure and Christian Death and
Oh, you've got to check out my goth band then. Guillotine Dream. Check it out. You might enjoy it.
Message me the names of the 2 projects you're doing, and I'll look them up and throw them on here so people can link to them.
Yeah, brilliant. I will do.
Yeah. Put up all your stuff. Yeah. I'm a big goth person too. So I like that stuff.
You should be out if you wanted to put tracks up. You should be all right. As far as like copyright goes, just for Guillotine.
I'll just put the links to it. YouTube's weird if I post it on the thing, so I'll just put up a link. Like if you want to hear it, here's a link to it. Then they can click it. So
yeah,
Yeah, just send me the names of your bands, and I'll have my editor who does all my computer stuff for me. I just send him all the stuff and he makes it happen. So Tim,
Yeah,
thanks,
no,
buddy. You're awesome.
no
All right, man.
problem.
Well, I'm gonna let you go. You enjoy your day. Thank you so much for doing this, Ian. I very much
So,
appreciate it.
nice to
Yeah,
talk to you, Tom.
if you can and want to subscribe to the channel, I can always use more people.
Yeah, no worries.
All
Will
right.
do.
Thank you, sir, man. You have a great day, bud.
Yeah, Andrew, take care. Bye, mate.
Cheers.